Welcome to The Satori Show with your host, Amy Satori, an intuitive spiritual counselor. Her gift is to help you live your most fulfilling life. Amy's unique ability to connect with our higher selves, guides, and loved ones is amazing. She answers our burning questions and helps us discover who we really are. Among her gifts is the direct connection with a spiritual guide named Celeste, whose objective is to unify and balance divine feminine and masculine energies and to assist in the ascension of our planet. Amy also speaks to other spirits, pets, mythical creatures, and even your body to help you manifest ultimate health, wealth, and happiness. She's helping people all over the world, including artists, athletes, celebrities, Nobel Peace Prize winners, writers, directors, entrepreneurs, other healers, and even regular folks like us. Her passion is to help you find your true love and shows you how to nurture and strengthen that connection. Her clients are amazed at her incredible gifts, and they tell everyone they know. And now you can talk with Amy direct. Just call 256-291-1191 any Sunday from 12 to 1 Mountain Time when the show is live. Please follow her on Instagram or subscribe to her newsletter at www.amysatori.com to stay connected with her lovely radiant energy and receive the newest updates. Now, join me, Kevin McDonald, as we turn our hearts and mind over to Amy's loving guidance and discover tips on how to create magical lives and relationships. It's time to break down those barriers and emerge as the butterfly you truly are. Right now on The Satori Show. And welcome to another episode of The Satori Show, everybody. My name is Kevin McDonald, and Amy Satori is your host, and she's standing by right here with a very important guest that we have. Amy?
Hey, everybody. We've got Jordan Maxwell here with us today, a sweet, sweet friend of mine, and we thought we'd explore the topic of religion today. He's very versed at this subject and has some pretty incredible knowledge that he's agreed to share with us today. So, Jordan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Amy. We're always happy to be on any show with you. Always very delighted to be with you.
Thank you.
It's an incredible subject that I got stuck with when I was 19 years old, and I've lived with it ever since. I'm fascinated with the spiritual implications of the life that we live. Where did the human being come from? Where did we come from? Where were we before we were born? and on the other end, where are we going when we leave here? And what is it all about? People come in, they live for 100 years if they're fortunate, and then they're gone. And where did we come from, and where do we go, and what's going on while we're here? And so it's always, these were childhood questions that all people wonder about. But I began to look into the actual system in which we live, where our education comes from, where our knowledge and our wisdom and where these ideas that we now hold to be so important and our religious thinking and our philosophical outlook, where did these ideas come from? I mean, we have so many different religions in the world. We got over 2,400 Christian religions around the world. Wow. All kinds of sects and cults and groups, and then we got the main ones, the Vatican and the Catholic Church, and then those people in the Middle Ages who broke away from the Catholic Church but kept the same faith. They kept the same religion, but they broke away because the Catholic Church was so unbelievably ungodly and was actually killing people. And so a lot of people broke off and came together, and it became known as the Protestant religion because these people were protesting the Vatican. They were protesting the stuff that was really going on in the Catholic Church that nobody could do anything about because it was too powerful, too well established, and too violent and vicious. And so it was murdering people across Europe who would not submit to the Pope, and I mean in horrible ways. And so there was a lot of people who broke off with Martin Luther to start with, and and others who were already the enemies of the church, and they became generally known as the Protestant Christianity today. But today, Protestant Christianity keeps the same basic fundamental ideas and concepts of the Catholic Church. So they broke away in that they went away from the church, but they took with them everything the church was teaching and set up their own church and started teaching the same thing. And of course, as is normally and natural, over the years, over the centuries, both of those religions, both Catholic and Protestant, have evolved and changed and codified themselves differently, so that today even the Protestant church bears no resemblance to what it was when it was first founded. And today, most people in the Protestant religion have no idea in the world what they're protesting about, or where any of these ideas have come from. And so most people don't realize, and it's basically around the earth, all over the world, whatever it is that you happen to be a part of, it's because that's where you were born. That's where you began your life. If you were born in China, you would eventually grow up to be a follower of one of the Chinese religions. If you were born in Africa, you would eventually end up in one of the African religions. If you were in Russia, and so it just depends on where you were born as to what how you spend the table as to where you end up and where you happen to have been born. So therefore, my point is that just because you happen to be a particular religion doesn't mean that you've got the truth and you are following the divine truth. It just means you're following a particular culture that you happen to have been born into. And I've talked to some very, very powerful people in this world about that subject. And one of the most important people I have ever met in my life, politically speaking, it was a very highly placed politician. And he said to me, he said, "Jordan, I was born a Jew. I don't know, but that doesn't mean I know anything. It just means that's where I happened by chance to have been born, and that's when I came into the world and to the family I came into. But that doesn't mean I know anything. Just like anybody else is born into something." And so that was the point I wanted to make, is that keep in mind that whatever it is you believe in, it's because that's who you were when you were born. That's what your life has led you into, or your particular place of birth led you into. And so you need to back off of the earth, intellectually speaking, in your mind. Back off, like George Carlin said, I've gotten so distraught with this world, I just back away from the whole world, and I just sit with some popcorn up in the balcony and watch the whole world go to hell on TV. And so that's my feeling too. You need to back off of what it is you think you understand and your beliefs and your theology, and look at the overall picture of the whole world. Where did all the religions come from? Why are so many people devoted to their particular religious belief and never even think about the possibility that they might be wrong and somebody else may be right? And so that's what I try to do. That's who I am, and that's what I do. I try and wake people up. That's all.
Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah. What about, like, Kevin and I were talking about this, about how even the Christian story or Jesus' story, doesn't it also correlate with some similar stories about a virgin?
Well, first of all, Christianity and Judaism have the same parent. This is something that neither one wants to talk about. But Judaism is not an original religion. Judaism is a retelling of a earlier story. All of it, all of Judaism is nothing more than a retelling of a story that came before it. And Christianity is a part of that same story. And so it's a hodgepodge unless you really go into theology and study it for many years. Do you begin to see where Christianity and Judaism are the children of a far more older parent? The older religion that gave birth to Christianity and Judaism and has even influenced Islam is Hindu. In India, the Hindus were a very powerful religious philosophy in the world, many hundreds and thousands of years ago. And so Judaism is nothing more than a retelling in the Western world of the Hindu religion. And Christianity is the same. Well, obviously, Jews and Christians are not interested to hear that their religion is actually Hindu. But if you are intellectually honest, which a lot of people aren't, but if you're intellectually honest and you are given to studying things deeply and meditating on them, and if your mind is like a parachute, it doesn't work if it's not open. But if you have an open mind and you really sincerely want to know where your belief systems have come from, and where your religion has originated, then you will go to the library and start reading the reference books, or go to the Bible bookstores where they've got dictionaries, encyclopedias, or you can even go to seminary libraries and Jewish seminary libraries. Go through and read all of the ancient books about Judaism and where it developed and why it developed the way it did. And you'll come to the same conclusion that I and many more like me have come to, that Judaism and Christianity is actually Hinduism. But what's even more interesting to me now is the fact that the stories in Judaism and Christianity, I would say especially Judaism, some of the stories are so different than what they are told to you today. Totally different than what they are told to us today. And I could give you some examples.
Can you give some examples?
Yeah, some of the examples are pretty extraordinary, and I almost don't want to talk about it in public. But when you hear about Moses and the Ten Commandments, and how Moses went up into the mountain and God gave him the Ten Commandments, he comes down like Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments. That's a story in the Bible in the Old Testament. But it has nothing to do with the original story on which the Ten Commandments is based. It is an incredibly different story completely. And you will be shocked and amazed and shamed in front of other adults to hear the original story that gave birth to the Ten Commandments and Moses, because the original story has nothing whatsoever to do with what we think the story in the Bible about Moses and the Ten Commandments deals with. It has nothing to do with that at all. If you go back and look at the words and examine the Phoenician and Canaanite words that are used that we call today Hebrew, there is, in fact, no such a language in the world called Hebrew. There is no such language as Hebrew. There is a language called Phoenician, from which we get the word phony and phonetics, and it's called a Phoenician language. And the people today who speak the Phoenician language we refer to them as Hebrews. And so the Hebrews speak the Phoenician language, but we, we're not part of Judaism. So we say that when we hear the Jews speaking their language, we say it's a Hebrew language. No, it's not a Hebrew language. The people speaking it are Hebrew, but the language itself is Phoenician. And so if you're going to understand the culture of the Jewish people and the culture that gave birth to Judaism, you're going to have to understand who were the Phoenicians and the Canaanites. I mean, we've all heard at some time in your youth about the land of Canaan, and the people of Canaan, the Canaanites. Well, the Canaanites are what we today call the Jewish people. They are the Canaanites, and they speak the Canaanite language, which was Phoenician. So what I'm saying is that when you look at the stories in the New Testament of the Torah, the Old Testament, not new, but the Old Testament story of Moses and all the stories in the Old Testament about the kings and queens and all the interesting stories in the Old Testament, you begin to, if you're really getting into it deeply and start looking at the words and the names of the people, you begin to see the hidden story. And the more you look at it, the more you study it, the story begins to develop more and more severe, until finally, after looking at it, reading and studying the old Phoenician language, which we call Hebrew, and where the stories in the Old Testament came from, you finally, if you do it for many years, you'll finally one day wake up and say, my God, I didn't know where these things have come from. Now I see it. And it's
Jordan,
an extraordinary experience. Yes.
Jordan, I wanted to ask you a question because you brought up Moses, and I think it bears some context here that when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the Ten Commandments, of course, Mel Brooks said there were originally 15 and 5 of them broke. But anyway, but he said, but in that time, the children of Israel had, according to the Bible, had left Egypt, the bondage in Egypt, and were wandering around the Sinai for like 40 years, and there were lots of them, over 100,000. And I believe that Moses didn't create the Ten Commandments and did not get them from a burning bush. He used them as a form of government to make sure that the people stayed in line and that he could keep these people all together. And that's why the Ten Commandments were actually formed, as a way of him to control the masses that were wandering around the desert at that time. Am I totally incorrect in that, or is that kind of sort of? That's
an overwhelmingly obvious possibility, but in point of fact, that's not what the actual history says. But I can see how one would come up with that thought, and it makes sense. But there's a bigger picture, far bigger picture. The bigger picture is that there was, in fact, no Moses. No Moses ever lived. There was no such a man named Moses. And we now know, I've been talking about it for some 50 years, there is no such a man as Jesus. Jesus, in fact, never lived. There was no man named Jesus. There was no man named King Solomon or King David. Go back to the Old what am I trying to say? The old Bibles, not the Old Testament, but go back to the 1400s, 1500s, the original Bibles that were written, and the first ones ever published, and you will find that those Bibles, everywhere you would read about King David, it wasn't spelled D-A-V-I-D. It was Druid, King Druid, D-U, not D-A-V, but D-R-U, Druid. So King Druid this and King Druid that. Well, then you go to encyclopedia or go on the web. Go on the web and go to image on your web server. Go to image, and then type in Druid priest or high priest, and you will see the high priest of the Druids dressed and taught exactly what we call Judaism today. They wore the same headdress, the same clothes, the same symbols. Everything the Bible and the Old Testament says the high priest of Judaism wore, you're seeing it when you go and look at what a high priest of the Druids wore and what they taught and what they believed. And then you'll say, well, that's the identical same clothes and the identical same teachings and beliefs that we call today Judaism. Well, that's what Judaism is. It came from the old Phoenician Canaanite system that developed in Europe, and it's called Druids. And so then when you understand that Judaism is Druidism, and Druidism eventually is traced back to India, to Hinduism, then you have to look at the stories coming out of the Old Testament all over again new. Now look at the old stories about the Ten Commandments and King David and King Saul and all of these different stories, completely different now from a far more ancient culture. But the stories have been fixed up for us. Well, I like to say spray painted and shrink wrapped and given to the new people of today. Wonderful, beautiful stories in the Old Testament. And they're so holy and so righteous unless you know what they're really talking about. So there's an encoded story in the Bible. Both Old and New Testament are encoded stories, metaphors. And so I've talked with so many rabbis, and they all say, yeah, of course, you're right. And I said, but why don't you teach the Jewish people that these are not actual events, these were not actual people, but these were encoded stories that have been changed over the years. And I've been told by rabbis, well, first of all, the Jewish people are not going to want to hear this. And I have a life to live. I got a wife and family. I got to raise children. And so I like you, have to have a job. I got to get an income. I have to do something. And so the Catholics have a massive way of making money, and the Protestants make a lot of money being ministers, and all the other religions in the world make a lot of money. It's all corporate business. Well, I've got to have a job too. I've got to have a religion, so I got a religion, and so they live very well. The Jews live very well because of their religion. Their fellow Jews finance them very heavily, and everybody's happy except me. But everybody's happy. They have the whole truth, and they are the superior people, and they know the whole truth, and God loves them, and everybody's happy, except the world of mankind. The whole world of mankind on the earth is very unhappy. There's a violent world that we live in, and there's a lot of bloodshed and violence because of people's belief systems. Mm-hmm. And so once I began to see all of this in perspective, it began to become apparent to me that these stories in the ancient and prehistoric world were one thing, but how they've been retold to us and changed the meaning of the words to be something totally different. So I'm just saying you will be shocked, amazed, and even shamed when you find out what these old stories in the Old Testament were really talking about, and what those old ancient words meant, and how different you are perceiving all of this today. It's just an extraordinary story of betrayal. And when I saw that, I decided, that's a long time ago. But when I saw that, I decided I want to open the world up to the real truth of religion and theology, and at least cause the world to wake up and start reanalyzing everything they believe and everything they think. And so that's what my life has been all about. I've been trying for some 58 years. I started doing this kind of talking and lecturing when I was 19 years old, back in 1959, which was a little over 58 years ago. And that's what I've been trying to do ever since, is just awaken people to the fact that what you think you know is not true. And boy, when you wake up and find out what it's really saying, it's going to be a shock to you.
So, Jordan, I wanted to ask you, because everything that we know about religion and religious philosophy comes from an exterior source. It comes from somebody else.
Yeah, of course.
There seems to be an awakening.
Sure.
Yeah, there seems to be an awakening now that people want to discover for themselves what's true, and that following the dictates of, as an example, when you talk to a Christian, they'll say, because the Bible tells me so. But the Bible is a hodgepodge of stories that was written a long, long time ago that doesn't necessarily have any relevance to today as far as who we are and where we are going. The way the story is told, that may not seem like it's relevant. But if you go back to the original, all the way back thousands of years ago, to the original stories, which are fed to us today differently, you will find, the actual story, the actual truth is that it's very relevant. The Old and New Testament is extremely relevant to us today, but we are looking at a different story. If you go back to the original, now it makes sense. Now it all begins to fall into line, and it begins to make sense, because now finally we understand what the original story was and how it was been changed and dressed all up, spray painted and shrink wrapped and given to us today and called Christianity. No, go back to Christianity when it was first developed, and then find out what it was developed on and what philosophy it was following at the time. And then it all begins for the first time to make sense. And I have seen that a long time ago, and it was so profound, such a profound impact on my psyche and on my spirit and on my life, that I thought, my God, this is the kind of stuff people need to know. And so I just decided, I suppose, I don't know how it happened, I just decided that this was something so important that if nobody's going to do it, then damn well, I'll do it. And so I wasn't prepared for it. So I had to spend my whole life reading in libraries and reading in university libraries and traveling around the world and talking to the experts. And eventually, after some 58 years, I am finally able to speak with some clarity on these subjects, because rabbis do not tell the Jewish people where these stories come from. And there are, of course, many Jewish people I've met that are highly intelligent and well-read. They know. And I can sit and talk with them about it, and they know. I'm not telling them anything new. But then I confront them and say, why is it but the Jewish people of the world don't know? And so they said, well, we're a lot like you. We started involving ourselves in our religion and really got into it. And the more we got into it, the more we began to see the same thing you're talking about. And so I see the importance of what I do.
I mean, what I bring to the table is not anything that I'm so handsome and beautiful that anyone should listen to me. I'm not the world's foremost authority on anything, period. I don't have I'm not a PhD and have a doctorate by my name. I'm just an ordinary man pursuing extraordinary knowledge. Because I don't have a PhD doesn't mean that I'm stupid. I can read, and happily the divine presence in the universe gave me a brain, and I can think, and logic alone tells you that you need to wake up and find out what you're doing and what you're believing and why you believe what you do and where did it come from. And so that's why I consider what I do to be important. Only not to educate and to cause trouble, but to at least cause people to wake up and start questioning where they've come from and why they believe what they believe. That's all.
Hey, Jordan,
Go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, Jordan. I mean, what the heck is the point to all of this then? I mean, like, why the Bible? Why all the different religions? I mean, what's the point?
Well, I think the point is that the way we were designed, when we were created, because as far as I'm concerned, we were created. Intellectually, I cannot understand the human race just coming out of the waters of one cell and coming out of the mud and growing up to be Albert Einstein. I don't buy that. And so I understand that we were created. Somebody designed our system. And so, but whoever did that, whatever God is, and whoever designed us, it was one incredible hell of an intelligence that would create humans and put our brains and our eyes and connect our senses and our spinal cord so that we can talk. We're a biological battery. We can reproduce ourselves, and we have a capacity to learn and to become great minds and mathematicians and love beautiful music, etc. But where did we come from? What is all of this all about? And so, but when you understand the Old Testament stories, the way they really were, and what they were actually talking about, then you find out these stories are very relevant to who you are and what you're doing today. It's just that we haven't been told the truth about the stories.
So what is
not?
The truth? Like what is it really about?
Say it again?
What is the truth? I mean, what is the original information really all about?
The original of religion is based on sex. Period.
Whoa. No.
Well, that's a good start.
Yeah.
That
especially if you're a guy, it's a good start. Yeah.
It kind of woke Amy right up there.
Yep. So that's the one thing that would get a man's mind quicker than anything. And I don't mind being honest because I know what I'm talking about. And so that's the problem today is between the two sexes, between male and female, between man and woman. And there's nothing you're going to do to stop it. All the stuff you hear about sex and the adulteries and all that, it's just purely human. Men are interested in women. They're interested in sex, period. And I don't mind admitting it because it's about time somebody admitted it. And so, but then you go back to the stories in the Old Testament and see that all of those old stories were based on sex and drugs, hallucinogenic drugs, and all kinds of devious stories about the human race and who we are, and and what motivates women. Well, that's in the stories, but it's a metaphor. It's a symbolic stories, and so and I hasten. I mean, I would love to, but I don't. do it too much. Go into some of the more popular stories and then tell you where they really came from and what they actually mean. And then when I do that, I lose a lot of people because they you can hear them falling on the floor. You know, they can't handle it. It's called cognitive dissonance. When you hear something so outrageous that you've never heard before. So,
just give us a little taste.
Well, for instance, the Ten Commandments. I've talked about that. We see Moses goes up into the mountain, and Moses was, as I said, never existed. But Moses was an ancient Middle Eastern, what we would call a Middle Eastern or Arabic figure. And the ancient Arabic religion, Moses was an important figure in the Arabic religion. Nobody said he actually lived, but we have many different religions that have gods that didn't actually live, but the words meant something. The word Moses simply means the son of. And so Moses goes up to Mount Sinai. Well, in the ancient Arabic world, they were moon worshippers. They worshiped the moon. There were also in this world, there was also solar worshippers of the sun. And there were star worshippers, the worshippers of the stars. But in the Middle East and in the Arabic world, they were basically moon worshippers. And so this is why today the Jews of this world today are followers of Moses, because he was the leader of a moon cult. And so we think of Judaism going back to the ancient Arabic world. And so the moon god, thousands of years ago in Arabia, the moon god's name, go look it up in the dictionary. His name was Sin, S-I-N. Not like the Catholic Church says when you do something bad that it was a sin. No, the moon god of Arabia was called Sin. That was his name. And the mountain, the people in Egypt and on the Egyptian side of the Sinai, people looking eastward every evening would see the moon rise. And when the moon rose, if you're from Egypt and you're seeing the moon rise in the east, there was an enormous mountain range in the middle of the Sinai, very high mountain range in the middle of the Sinai. And so when the moon would rise, the people would see it coming from the mountain. So the moon god, his name was Sin, became known as the old man of the mountain. And you will see that in many of the Islamic sects in the Islamic world. They talk about the old man of the mountain. Well, that was the moon god. And his name was Sin. And in the ancient language, a mountain was Ai. Ai goes back to a word in the ancient Arabic for a mountain. And so Sin lived in the mountain. Obviously, he lived there because every night he comes out. And so every day at 6 o'clock, after the sun's gone down at 6 o'clock, the moon wakes up and comes out of his mountain. And so his name was Sin, and the mountain is Ai, put them together as Sinai. So we talk about how holy Sinai. No, there's nothing holy about Sinai. The only thing holy is in your head. You're not reading this thing right. It's Sinai was Sin Ai, the god of the mountain Ai. His name was Sin. Put it together, it becomes Sinai. All right, well, now we understand that Sinai was a mountain of the moon god, Sin. Now, when you look at Moses going up into Sinai, he's going up to talk to his god, Sin, Ai. And then when you find out Sinai, as I said, Sin was the god of the mountain. Today, the Jewish religion all over the world celebrates their day's beginning. The beginning of a Jewish day is after 6 o'clock in the evening. So from 6 o'clock in the evening one day to 6 o'clock in the evening of the next day is the Jewish 24-hour day. But they don't start it from the morning. They start it from 6 o'clock in the evening. So why all the holy days and the counting of time? Why is it always from moon to moon? Well, because of the moon god's sin. And the moon god's sin came out at 6 o'clock in the evening. He wasn't here until after 6. So then the old Arabic god, who we today call Allah, A-L-L-A-H, Allah, which goes back to an Arabic word for God, Allah. Allah is Yahweh. Yahweh to the Hebrews is the Almighty God, Yahweh. But Yahweh is actually the same God as Allah. Allah and Yahweh, the same God. Just one's Arabic and one's Jewish. And so when Moses goes up into the mountain to get the new dispensational laws, the new laws for the people, God's going to have a whole new religion. So you have to go up and talk to sin. He was the God of the mountain. And so Moses goes up there, and he comes back down with the 10 Commandments. Well, the real story is that the 10 Commandments that we Christians and people today, we think of 10 Commandments with Moses, like Charlton Heston coming down from the movie 10 Commandments, coming down with two big plates of stone with the 10 Commandments on them. But that's not what the actual Hebrew reference works say. That's not what the Jewish reference works and Christian reference works say. If you go to these big libraries and stay there for a year studying, the 10 Commandments and all the words involved in it, you begin to see that no, there was no stones. The reference works say that there were 2 small round stones, and that Moses carried the 2 round stones in one hand. They weren't slabs of rock. There were 2 round stones, and the Hebrews call those 2 round stones upon which the 10 Commandments were written. The 10 Commandments, according to the references, said that they were written on 2 round stones, but they were identical. All 10 were on one stone, and all 10 were on the second stone. And there were 2 stones. And the reason why is because in the Jewish religion, if you're going to make a point in law, you must have 2 witnesses. One witness will not do. If you're going to bring charges against someone or prove something before God, you must have 2 witnesses. So, therefore, God gave 2 witnesses to his laws to Moses. There were 2 small round stones that you could carry on one hand. And so then you find out the 2 stones are referred to in Hebrew today. The Jews don't call it the 10 Commandments. They refer to them as the 2 stones as the stones of the testimony. The 2 stones of the testimony. We today think about it as big slabs with the 10 Commandments written on it, and we call them the 10 Commandments. Actually, the 10 Commandments were based on an Egyptian commandments, which were called the 12 negative confessions. Look it up in a dictionary. Do something really interesting. Read a book. Go to the library and get a reference book on religion, and you will see that what we call 10 Commandments was originally in Egypt called 12 negative confessions. And the 12 negative confessions were borrowed by the Jewish religion and dropped 2 commandments. They dropped 2 of the 12 confessions and make it into 10 confessions instead of 12. And so the reason why 10 has to do with sun worship, because the sun was referred to as the Aten, A-T-E-N. The Aten was the sun in Egypt. So when you begin to break all of this down slowly but surely over a period of a year of just studying as one subject, you finally begin to see what the real subject was. Moses went up and was going to confront God. He was going to come, close to God as a man could get. So he went up to get the 10 Commandments. No, 12 negative confessions of Egypt. And he was getting it from Sinai, or Sin, the moon god. And that's why today Judaism refers to the 10 Commandments as the stones of the testimony. And now when you see the stones of the testimony, because, when Christians are in churches, they have to testify, or if you're going into a court, you're going to be testifying, or if you're a kid in school, you have to have a test. And so the word test and testimony comes from testes. The 2 round stones that Moses comes down with is the human testicles. And they were called the stones of the testimony. And people do not realize that in the ancient Egyptian world, as it is also in the ancient Jewish world, or the Jewish world as we know it, if you go as a Jew, if you go into court in Israel, in the old days, it probably still today is the same thing, but in the old days, if you were a Jew and you're going into court against another Jew, then you're taking your brother Jew to court. And in court, you are obviously at war. You're at war with him, and you're going to court to settle an argument. And so the way the Jewish concept of law read, based on the Egyptian, is that when you go in and you're going to testify, then you must hold your testicles when you testify. And then the idea being is if we catch you lying against your brother Jew, you better figure out what's going to happen here. You're holding your testicles when you testify, and you're making a testimonial. So it has to do with the sexual symbol of testicles. And they were the 2 round stones that you can carry in one hand. And then Moses goes up to confront God with his testicle, and he confronts what is referred to, the Jews refer to it as the Shekinah. It's a Shekinah light, or the female, the burning bush. And so you begin to see the burning bush is actually the female and the female part of God. And so you put it all together, and it all boils down to sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's just business. It's just a story. And there was no 10 Commandments. There were 2 testicles connecting to the burning bush, and that's confronting God. And so out of that union between the 2, Moses comes down with a new understanding. It's called a new dispensation in Judaism. So the whole idea of that beautiful picture of Moses coming down with the 10 Commandments and the Lord blesses the Jewish people and all that, no, we're talking about sex and the moon god. And that's why the moon is connected with romanticism, because it all has to do with sex. It all has to do with the realization of God at the moment of sex is a relationship between male, female, and the divine presence in the universe. And so now you begin looking at these stories the way they really understood when they were going back thousands of years. And now you see the Bible is not telling you what you think it is. It's been rewritten, and new ideas and new words put in that we understand, but it has nothing to do with the original. And that's just one story out of about 50. That the whole story of the 10 Commandments is nothing more than the connecting of testicles with the burning bush, and the connection with God, the presence of God in the male and female's life, and then all of the things you need to know. Say it again?
Kundalini.
Yeah.
Tantra.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. And
Wow.
and this is why and one other thing, when you see on TV and the news at night, the Jews at the Wailing Wall, and they're bobbing back and forth as they're praying. They're holding the prayer books, and they're bobbing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth as they're praying. They will tell you that is a holy ritual. When they're bobbing back and forth. No, the rabbis will tell you that's the Jew having sex with Shekinah, not Hekinah, Shekinah, and so they are bobbing back and forth, representing that they are having sex with the female part of the divine presence in the universe. God is both male and female. And the scripture said he created man and Adam and Eve in his, God created Adam and Eve in his likeness, an image and likeness.
Right.
Well, if he created Adam and Eve in his image and likeness, that means one half of God is female and the other half is male. And
This is so crazy. I'm like, so much of this that you're saying is just like blowing my mind, but in a good way. And I mean, this is even like, this is referencing twin flames too, potentially.
Yeah,
so I'm just like, what? This is big.
That's why today, once you understand these stories, then you begin to look at the stories in the Talmud, especially both the Babylonian Talmud especially, but in the Talmud, the most holy book in all of Judaism, where there's all kinds of stories in the Talmud about it's all right for a man to have sex with a 4-year-old, a little 3-year-old girl. It's all right for a man to have sex with a 6-year-old boy. There's nothing wrong with having sex with a 5-year-old. And even in Islam today, a grown man of 40 or 45 years old can marry a little 4-year-old or 5-year-old and consummate the marriage. And sometimes it kills the child. But that's part of the Islamic religion. They go back to the old days where men could rape children and have sex with each other. And then, of course, we know that this is also true today in Hollywood with the Jews that run Hollywood. We're now seeing that among the Jews there's a lot of pornography and all kinds of that kind of activity. And God knows we know the Catholic Church and the Vatican with its problems with sex and connection. And so now you see all three of those religions came from the old ancient religions, which was nothing but sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The whole thing was based on sex.
Wow.
Does this make any sense?
Isn't that kind of, the history of mankind is everything's about sex and money. If it isn't about one, it's about the other, but sometimes they're intertwined to be both.
That's right. You get that right. And they talk about the oldest profession. Yeah, well, the oldest profession is religion. We call it sex. And then even in the Bible, it says the number of a man is 6. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so the number of a man, the Bible says, is 6. But how do you spell 6 in Latin? S-E-X. So when the woman says, yeah, I got his number, it's sex. Period. And
by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Jordan Maxwell. Jordan, you also have a website.
Yes.
Please go into talking about your website and how somebody can get a hold of the information that you have spent the last 58 years assembling. Yeah,
I appreciate that, and thank you. My website is Jordan, Jordan, like the river Jordan, Jordan Maxwell Show, SHOW. There are other websites out there with my name on it that I do not own. So if you're looking for my work, Jordan Maxwell Show.com. And when you go to JordanMaxwellShow.com, you will see it's actually a podcast. And there are many shows. There's about 35 or 40 shows that I've done. And then when I stopped doing them, we started adding other shows that I have done for other people. So there's a lot of my radio shows on Jordan Maxwell Show. But also, even more important, I'd like for you to know, is that there's a second website to Jordan Maxwell Show. And you have to join that. You have to click on the name and join it. And it's called the Jordan Maxwell Research Society, or the research website. And what that is just another website that I have devoted all of my research work on everything, on government, religion, banking, money, sex, drugs, rock and roll, and the whole world you live in, and where all of these things really came from, not what you thought they were.
I got a question, Jordan.
Yeah. Okay.
I know a lot of these incredible people that you've met throughout your life. Could you share some of these people? I mean, I know you have to protect some of the people that you know, but if you could share with us just to kind of validate the kind of people that you talk to on those high levels, can you list off maybe some of these people that you've had these incredible conversations with?
I really would love to. I would love to, but I'm hesitant because these particular people were so very high up and so profoundly well known in the world today that and the way that I met them, the occasion of how I come into their life and how I met them and what we said is really not something I feel secure about talking about in public. I don't mind talking about the subjects we talked about, but I don't want to name names because I just know that when somebody gives a name of a very famous person, that could cause problems to that person's life or his. And so, and I would never do that to anyone. Anytime someone, as a journalist, I would just never do that, give their name. I would tell you in private. But I've sat with and been close friends with some people that are at the top of this world. Period. And been able to sit with them and chit chat and have dinner with them and have lunch with them, and but I would love to be able to tell the world the whole story, who I know, what they've said, and what I've seen them do with my own eyes, what I've seen them do, where I met them, the occasion, what I saw, and what they said, and what they did. I would love to just reveal all of that. There's a part of me that would just love to be able to tell people, you think this person is so holy and so righteous? I was there. I saw what he did, and I've talked with people you have no idea in the world that I know. But my gut feeling is my conscience tells me, watch what you say in public, because what you say in public can cause you some serious problems, because these are very powerful people. I'm not going to cross them.
I wouldn't. But let me just say, as your friend, and having talked to you in private and having heard a lot of these stories that you've shared with me, I know them to be quite valid and quite true and quite powerful and profound. He knows what he's talking about. He really does know these incredible people, and I can personally validate that. And this is real stuff, people. This is real stuff he's talking about.
I thank you for that, because I truly would love to be able to talk, but I just know as a professional doing radio for over 40 years, I know just because you had the blessing in your life to be able to meet one of the most powerful men on the earth and talk with him in private and become very close to him and have long conversations does not mean you can use his name in public and talk about what he said. I can't do that. I would never do that.
No, that's great.
Oh, come on.
I appreciate that.
It's just the three of us listening. Come on, you can be
right.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
I appreciate about him, though. He's honest and has integrity. He's honest and has integrity. I mean, I just got to say that about him.
I just cannot see myself putting a powerful man who befriended me, allowed me to come into his company, and where other powerful people in the world could not get to him. But for some strange and reason, I was able to be in the right place at the right moment at the right time, and was able to meet this person. And then chemically, we became friends instantly. I liked that person personally, and they liked me. And so they invited me to come into their home and come into their life. And we sat and talked, and we've talked many times. And if I told you, you would be shocked. So, but I would also impact their life and their marriage and their position in power. If other people equally as powerful found out that they were talking to me about things that I'm not supposed to know, I would be in trouble, and so would they, and I just can't do it. But anyway, that's just one story. That's just one story, and
we understand completely, Jordan. But by the way, if you want to find out more about Jordan, go to Jordan Maxwell's show and follow the leads, and that'll take you to the research page, and you sign into that, and you can look at all the research he's done over the last 58 years. It's pretty remarkable. And Jordan, we don't want to take any more of your time because you're quite a busy man, and you've got lots and lots and lots of stuff to do. So, but I would like to personally thank you for coming on the show today. And do you have anything else you'd like to add before we close this podcast?
Well, I would just say that your mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it's not open. And just keep in mind how much you don't know. This is what keeps me humble. I try and always be respectful of other people and present my work and present my findings with humility. And it's not a false humility. I really feel very, very humble to be able to be in the presence of important people and be able to be trusted by them, and they tell me things, and so all I want to do is just to distribute the knowledge that I have been given to my fellow man, because I think every day how much people don't know, and you have no idea where these words have come from. And so I just want to wake people up to the fact that you don't know what's going on, and don't be self-centered and egotistical and know-it-all, because that's what the Pharisees in the life of Jesus were like. People who have the law, they know everything there is to know about everything, and yet they are lying to the people. They are purposely misleading the people for money, for business, it's corporations, nothing but the manipulation of the human family to make money and to control people. And I am just not, there's nothing special about me. I'm just an ordinary man pursuing extraordinary knowledge. And I love being able to share it with good people who want to know. I've got a lot of detractors that want me to shut up, but I do want to help the good people who want to know. And so I have to talk to everybody to find the good ones. So I would say just start doing some research on your own on the world you live in. You know, where is the power of this earth? Where is it? Who, you got laws to live by. Who wrote those laws? Who wrote the law? And so, well, when you find out who wrote the law, well, then they're the ones that are in power, and you have to follow the law. I don't mind following the law. I'm a law-abiding person. But I'm just curious to know who wrote this law. And what does it really mean? Let's go back to the original words, and then you'll find out there's phonetics, and go back to the original word and who wrote this law. Well, it was written by a Rothschild, old man Rothschild. Oh, really? The super rich man, he writes a law for me? Did he talk to my God who created me? And if it's all right for Rothschild to write a law that I have to live by, and I don't mind living by it because I'm ignorant, I'm ill-informed, I don't read, and I don't know. But I'm giving up my God-given power of knowledge and wisdom and freedom to abide by somebody else's law. And then you find out, well, in America, there is no law. That's another story about America's law. Where did our laws come from? Who wrote them? And that's why you have to have a license to be an attorney. You must have a license to be an attorney. Why? Because you're making money as a lawyer. And how are you making the money as a lawyer? Well, first of all, if you're making money, that's business. So you better get a business license. And how are you making the money? We're making the money because we've read all the law books. Well, who wrote those law books? Well, the boss wrote the law books. Yeah, well, then you better pay him a piece of the action. Because if you're using his book to make you money, then you need to pay him. If I wrote a script and you're going to use that script in a movie, you better pay me first and get my permission to use my script. And so the person who wrote the laws is basically saying to the lawyers of America, you better pay me. It took a long time for me to figure out all these laws and write them all down and have them put into books. And now you're going to go into court and make a lot of money as a lawyer, but you're using my book and you're making money. It's business, son. I want 20% off the top, and I want you to know you're using my laws, so you better get a license to use my laws to make yourself money. That's why you got to get, when you get married, you're going to have a license. And why? Is because the person you're marrying is a corporation. And that's another whole story about who we are as human beings.
But wouldn't you say that tithing is the equivalent in churches?
Well, tithing, you're talking about the contribution to the church tithing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Where that
10%
comes
off
from,
the top that we have to give to the church.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, son. You're wrong. It's 20% off the top. That 10% was when your grandma was around. Now today it's 20%. But no, tithing, where that came from, is then the ancient Phoenician Canaanite world in the Middle East and in India. Once a year, when you would collect all the crops that you planted the year before, and when you go out and harvest all the crops, thank God there is a crop, because that means you can eat the next year. And so the idea was in the ancient world to take 10% of the seeds in the crop and put them away and seal them up for a year, so that next year you will at least have some crops now to go out and plant again. You'll have the seeds to plant again, which means you'll have food next year. And so you will always take out 10% and put it into a warehouse, seeds into the warehouse. And then next year, when everybody's ready to plant food, well, you go to the warehouse and you got the seeds from last year. And so what you're doing is you're giving back 10% to God, so to speak. You're giving 10% back to the universal God force of life on the earth. You don't expect the earth to just give you more food. No, you got to plant the seeds. Well, if you eat all the seeds one year, you're going to starve next year. And so the idea is tithing goes back to the idea that if you own the land and you're going to harvest the food, keep 10% out for the seeds for next year. And so the church comes by and rubs their chin and says, that sounds interesting. Let's say that you're giving back 10% to God. Yeah, but why am I writing the check to you? Yeah. And then you find out, no, the check is going to the corporation called the Catholic Church. It's a corporation under International Maritime Admiralty law. The Church of the Vatican is a corporation. It's a company. And so once you understand it's a company, then they have stockholders. Now you're getting into some really interesting stuff. Who actually are the stockholders of the corporation called the Vatican? Who owns the Vatican? Better wake up and start thinking. And then you'll find out that the United States is no longer the United States of America. We are no longer the United States of America. That was dropped during the Civil War officially by the courts. So today we are a corporation. We're not a country. It's a big story about the world you live in. There's only a handful of people on the earth that care to hear it. And most people are not interested to hear the truth. Like the movie said, Tom Cruise said, I want the truth. Jack Nicholson said, you can't handle the truth, son. You're not old enough to handle the truth. Well, that's exactly right. The people today, unfortunately, I've said it so many times, the way I view the world is most people are like old Christmas tree lights. Half of them don't work and the rest are not that bright. And most people don't want to hear the truth. The one thing they don't want to hear is the truth. So that's why today there's so much misunderstanding, so much violence, so much religious bigotry, so many men mistreating women and women mistreating men, and institutions and churches, etc., and governments mistreating the people, and the people mistreating themselves. And the whole world is going to hell and color TV because knowledge is power. And the people have no knowledge. Even the scripture says, my people are dying from a lack of knowledge. So that's what I'm trying to do before I leave this earth, and I'm going to be leaving soon, I suspect, because I'm almost 78 years old. But I've been doing this for almost 60 years, trying to awaken people to the fact that you don't know what the world is all about. You think you do. Like teenagers, you think you know everything, and your father and mother don't know from nothing because you know everything. And the more you grow up, the older you get, the more your dad and mother look like they maybe were onto something. Maybe they did know something you didn't know. And so that's what I try and do with my work, is just to help people to wake up and find out how much you don't know. But again, thank you for having me on the show, and I always appreciate it, and I always like coming on your show, so we can do it anytime you want.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for you. You're just such a blessing in my life, and I just appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you, dear. I appreciate you, too. You've been very kind to me and very considerate, and we'll do it again.
Definitely.
Absolutely. And I'd like to personally thank you as well. It's great to have you on the show, and as Jack would say, the truth, you can't handle the truth.
That's it. Thank you again. Goodbye.
With that, thank you very much, Jordan. And Amy, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we close?
No, it was so cool because we just had that talk about the last show about Tantra and sexuality. And so I had no idea this was going to tie together so beautifully. I mean, it's a lot to think about. But wow. Cool.
Well, everybody does have, sex on their mind. That's all they do is have sex on their mind. So it's great. Thank you ever so much, Jordan Maxwell. Go to jordanmaxwellshow.com and you can find out more about this incredible man and what he's done. And go to amysatori.com if you want to find out more about her. I don't have a website. Mine is tied to Amy, so my boat's floating with hers, so I appreciate that. And with that, Amy, have you got a saying that you'd like to say that I've asked you to say every time on these shows?
Yeah, fear isn't real.
And with that, take care, everybody. We'll see you next time on The Satori Show. You've been listening to The Satori Show. Please visit Amy's website, www.amysatori.com, to find out more about this incredible talent. The views expressed during this podcast are those of the host, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of management or the owners of this podcast. What you need to know is that Amy is a wonderful teacher, guide, and communicator for the unseen world. What she does not pretend to be is a doctor, fortune teller, seer of world events, or predictor of what is to come. What Amy presents is real, based on her understanding of the world and communication with that unseen world. As always, you're free to decide for yourself as to what to believe. Regardless, we love and accept you completely just as you are. And thanks again for listening to The Satori Show.